Poppy Playtime has a problem, a few problems at that. And this is something I'm willing to admit as someone who almost purely talks positively about the franchise, at least in terms of gameplay. The title excels in ways that we have never seen before in the indie horror game genre. And while Poppy Playtime's gameplay isn't necessarily superior to AAA horror titles like Resident Evil, even in Poppy Playtime's most critical videos, everybody still has to give it credit for being such a good title.
Going into Poppy Playtime, I thought it was just gonna be another Bendy and the Ink Machine, but surprisingly, I actually really liked it.
However, notably, it's not perfect, and I sort of wanted to talk about the flaws Poppy Playtime has had that give me some sort of red flags for the future of it, especially in the long term.
Part of me is like, who is this? The other half, that's who I miss.
So the first thing I sort of wanted to address is a problem that a lot of games in the similar genre have, and it's a problem with consistently breaking promises. From Bendy and the Dark Revival coming in 2019, or FNAF Security Breach actually being a good game, these similar indie horror titles struggle to put out what they promise, and Poppy Playtime has actually been no different. For example, the mobile ports for the game. The purpose of the mobile ports was to provide an alternative way for people to access Poppy Playtime, simple enough. And on multiple occasions, it was clarified that every Poppy Playtime chapter was going to release on PC and mobile at the exact same time. This commitment, as we know, would not even last 2 chapters because it took the developers around 3 extra months to turn Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 into a mobile port, which is slightly disappointing. Especially for mobile players expecting to get to experience the fun of Poppy Playtime with everybody else, but instead they were just stuck waiting until nobody's even talking about it anymore and we've all moved on to Chapter 3. It's a little disappointing, but another thing that sucks is that the price of the game just keeps going up and up, which is kind of pissing me off and a lot of other people too. So Poppy Playtime originally had a pretty simple layout in terms of game pricing. They were supposed to release Chapter 1 for $5, and then the second chapter for $5, the third for $5, and so on until the game ends, making the full title around $20, which seems to be pretty fair. However, of course, as we know, this wouldn't end up being the case, because I'm sure we all remember the controversial move the devs did by making the first chapter randomly free, and then deciding to think that warranted charging $10 for the next chapter, making it a lot more expensive. I mean, assuming you bought both chapters like most players, that means for 2, maybe 3 hours of gameplay, you're paying $15 already, which is a stupid amount of money that I can't justify. This is a problem that's also shown up on mobile, but not to the same degree. For example, the first chapter is $3 while the second chapter is $6, meaning once again the price for the next chapter entirely doubled, which is honestly super freaking annoying. The justification I've seen a lot of people having for this price increase is that the game's quality is getting better and the game is getting a lot bigger and bigger, which initially seems sort of fair, but for one, that ties back into them breaking promises because they did say that every chapter was going to cost the same amount. And also, this leads into my next problem that I don't really see people talking about too much, but it's that Poppy Playtime is honestly getting too overambitious for their own good.
I know I talk about it way too much, but talking about it, man, that's my crutch.
So to Poppy Playtime's credit, the second chapter especially is absolutely insane in terms of size. It is a multi-hour puzzle-filled experience that absolutely stomps on the first chapter in ways that we weren't ever expecting. But now that we have this big second chapter, what's next? We've already had the long playthrough with a big cinematic boss fight at the end. What are they gonna do next? Just try that 3 or 4 more times and call that a game? They realistically can't, because the game is supposed to improve and innovate as time goes on, and I honestly fear Poppy Playtime might already be outdoing themselves. Think about it, it took 6 months for Chapter 2 to come out, which is a long time when considering there's still a full game that needs to be developed. And 3 months later, we just now got a teaser for Chapter 3 saying that it could release anytime in 2023. So at least 7 months from when Chapter 2's release, all the way up to 19. That's a fucking unreasonable amount of time for the game to be developing at the midpoint of the series. And the reason it's probably taking so long most likely is because they're forcing themselves to try and consistently top the second chapter, and are making the third chapter a lot longer to play through, which isn't inherently a bad thing. If anything, it's actually inherently a good thing. But in the long run, this brings up a big problem with the title, because then what happens after Chapter 3 or after Chapter 4? Are they gonna take some sort of 2-year break to make the 5th chapter? The young demographic that plays Poppy Playtime will honestly have literally grown up by then. So I really don't know what they're trying to do here. Also, let's be honest with ourselves. Chapter 2 was great and all, but do we really need an even longer chapter? A 3-hour, 4-hour, 5-hour chapter even? Not really. And while of course there's plenty of games that take hundreds of hours out there that people love and enjoy, Poppy Playtime clearly isn't designed like that. And remember when Bendy and the Ink Machine tried the longer game equals better game route? The game became a big bore to anybody trying to play it in a completed state, because walking around doing little puzzles for 10 hours isn't isn't fun, and it won't be for Poppy Playtime either.
These days, things I crave. It ain't money, it's better days. Been flying.
I don't want to talk about shadiness too much, but yeah, Mob Games is a damn shady company. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but of course they're known for manipulating others to get what they want, and while that was years ago, it's still something that gets under my skin every time I talk about or even just play Poppy Playtime. Because the reputation of Poppy Playtime outside of the actual game development is pretty well tarnished, and there's thousands of people who won't play the game at all anymore just after hearing about everything the developers have done, from trying to get other animators to join their animation team to keep them from competing. And moving on to the next and main point of this video, their greedy marketing tactics.
Only thing that seems to work, had to put the blunt down, made it worse. Now I'm on a
Poppy Playtime merch is a huge part of its notoriety. Just go to your local mall and there will be tons of kiosks of fake Poppy Playtime merch everywhere, or just check your local elementary school where tons of kids will be bringing their stuffed animals as well. But while of course those are annoying and they're everywhere, they're 20-cent bootlegs and I don't really care about them. The real problem is official Poppy Playtime merch, because goddamn is it a ridiculous scam that I don't feel like anybody is bringing up. Of course, I already mentioned the NFTs where they sold different lore secrets behind paywalls to a largely child-based audience who probably didn't even know what the hell an NFT was. But just as bad or even worse, head over to the Poppy Playtime official store where you'll find the worst overcapitalized crap that I've ever seen. On the site we have $70 Huggy Wuggy plush, the Huggy Wuggy missing teeth pencil pouch, a $15 notebook. What about the 2 smaller Huggy Wuggy plushes that genuinely look worse than the $5 bootlegs on AliExpress? Maybe you're more into the $60 hoodies they sell. Or how about this, guys, the $20 fucking posters that are actually on sale for $15. What a steal. Pins, ringer tees, tie-dye tees, long sleeve tie-dye tees. Why is there so much stuff in this store? Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but the amount of shit that Poppy Playtime sells is absolutely ridiculous. And when considering the random price increases of chapters that we talked about earlier, this starts to make me really question the morals of the developers and whether or not they're really making this game to actually develop something cool, or if they're just trying to milk money from the people who are supporting them while the game's still popular.
running out of time, saying what's on my mind. Been a lonely.
So another problem that Poppy Playtime has that most people don't want to talk about is the fact that, like most of these indie games, it's a bit of a flavor of the month type game. Which, if you didn't know what that is, basically think of games like Bendy and the Ink Machine. They absolutely popped off for a relatively short amount of time, and nowadays it's nothing more of a relic that didn't really last. Similarly, Poppy Playtime rose to fame pretty randomly, and if we're being honest, the concept is pretty generic. People went missing, you have to go and find out what happened to them, while haunted things come to life and try and stop you. It's very similar to FNAF or Bendy or most games of the same genre. With that being said, inherently Poppy Playtime probably doesn't have that much longevity, and I actually think they're aware of this, because they're doing all this merchandising right now while the game's popular to profit off it before it ends up dying. They've even brought up ideas of movies and different sequels already to presumably build hype for this game long term while people still care about it, rather than trying to beg people to come back to the game after it's already dead like what Hello Neighbor tried. It may seem like a smart strategy on their end, but it's honestly a bit manipulative. And especially as the internet becomes more and more condemning, as we saw with their last Ecker Coaster controversy, these could lead to some serious long-term issues for Poppy Playtime. Basically, the overall message I'm trying to get out with this video is that they're a pretty greedy company, I won't lie. They've been doing a lot of random price increases, they've been selling a stupid amount of merch, they're already talking about movies, sequels, VR ports, everything. And I think that them focusing so much on the financial aspect of Poppy Playtime is going to really hurt them in the long run. I don't know, that's just my opinion, and of course I was throwing a little bit of fun at all the merch drops that they've been doing recently, but they definitely seem like they're making a game to try and make money, rather than them making money just because they made a game. I don't know if that makes any sense, but to all the Poppy Playtime supporters, let me know in the comments below what you think about all this random merchandising and stuff that's been going on, because even though I've seen a couple people bring it up, it's been going on for months and months, and especially with their back to school collection that released recently, it definitely feels like they're building a huge brand around Poppy Playtime, and I don't know how you guys feel about it.